bill that seeks to take away the stature of information commissioners from equivalent of election commissioners and give the centre the power to set their salaries and service conditions was introduced in the Lok Sabha on Friday amidst protests by opposition parties. Now, introducing the Right to Information Amendment Bill 2019, the Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office, Jitendra Singh, said that the bill aims at the institutionalisation and the streamlining and ease of delivery of the RTI Act. He says it strengthens the overall RTI structure, and he described it as an enabling legislation for administrative purposes. Activists, though, have criticised the amendments, and they say that it will weaken transparency panels in the country. Opposing the introduction of the bill, the leader of the Congress party in the Lok Sabha, Adhir Ranjan Chowdhury, said the draft law is a threat to the independence of the Central Information Commissioner, or the CIC. Now, while 224 members supported its introduction, 9 opposed it. The Congress, the Trinamool, the DMK and the BSP opposed the introduction of the amendment bill before staging a walkout.
This amendment is meant to bring about institutionalization of RTI Act, streamlining of RTI Act and ease of delivery. On the contrary to what you are saying, this is rather going to strengthen the RTI structure as such. There is no interference with the RTI Act. This is rather an enabling legislation for administrative purposes. And jahan tak aa gaya ji consultation hi hui, due consultation was done with the legal affairs department, the legal department.
By removing the statutory term, by making it subject to the government's wishes based on the government's rule-making powers, and by taking over the power. No, sir, please understand, it's not about the merits, sir. It's not an RTI amendment bill. It is an RTI elimination bill, sir. This bill is removing the two greatest armors of institutional independence.
Why I say it lacks competence, sir, is because the clause 3 of amend section 16 of the Principal Act. Sir, this abrogation, it takes away the powers of the state. That is why I say that this bill lacks competence, sir.
All right, so we're asking tonight, is this an attempt to dilute a landmark law? While the government says the bill has been introduced to structurize the RTI law, the opposition claims that it will weaken the RTI Act of 2005. And to discuss this, in studio we have Deshratan Nigam, political analyst, a lawyer. We have Anjali Bharadwaj, the co-convener of the NCPRI, co-founder of the Satrak Nagrik Sanghatan, and Garga Chatterjee, TMC supporter, all joining us. Anjali, you heard Mr. Jitendra Singh there, Anjali Bharadwaj, as he introduced the bill. I don't need to repeat what he says. He goes as far as to say no one can question the Prime Minister Modi's government's commitment to transparency. Your response?
Look, the right to information law has been one of the most empowering legislations for people because it has enabled them to question the government and to hold the government accountable. People are using the law to ask about their fundamental rights, their basic rights, and they're also using it to question the highest offices of the country, whether it's the Prime Minister's office or it's about demonetization, it's about the Prime Minister's foreign travels, or it's about the NPAs of banks. So this is a very important piece of legislation through which people very often ask for information which is inconvenient or embarrassing to the government. This particular amendment bill, we see it as a direct attack on the right to information of people because it aims at reducing the autonomy and the independence of information commissions. These commissions are very important for the law, for the proper implementation of the law, because if someone is not given information by the government, the only place that people can go in an appeal, in an independent appeal today, is the information commissions, and these commissions have the powers to direct the government to give information to citizens and make sure that the law is implemented properly. Through these amendments, the government is trying to usurp for itself the powers to decide the tenure of information commissioners, their salaries and their terms of reference. Right now, all of this is decided through law. The RTI law clearly lays out that all information commissioners have a tenure of 5 years. up to a maximum age limit of 65 years, of course. It clearly says that the Information Commissioner's salaries and terms of service will be the same as that of election commissioners, which is that of Supreme Court judges, decided by Parliament, not the government. The reason why all this is laid out in the basic framework of the law is so that commissioners can work without fear, without favor, without worrying that if they give orders that are inconvenient to the government, their tenure or salaries will be affected.
Correct.
By bringing these amendments, the government is trying to create an atmosphere of fear for these commissioners, where they will constantly be worried that their terms of service could be adverse, there could be an adverse consequence for them if they give information, if they give an order to disclose information that the government finds inconvenient. So this is a direct attack on people's right to know.
Deshratan Nigam, we had an aborted attempt in 2018. The central government now proposes to amend the RTI Act again of 2005. Now, please explain why and how this bill, if passed, will allow the centre to decide the tenure and the salaries of state and central information commissioners. How does this improve transparency, which is what Mr. Jitendra Singh is saying?
See, let us be very clear. This is merely an introduction of the bill. This bill has to be discussed threadbare in the Parliament, and only then it can be passed.
Yes, but the amendment basically says that the salary and the tenure will then, the centre will be responsible for deciding that.
Yes.
So how does that help transparency?
Amendments, if passed, yes. Let us, we are all jumping the gun. These will be discussed threadbare. If there are any amendments moved by other members, they can also be discussed. One.
Mr. Nigam, we don't
see,
want
let me
get to it getting passed. I'm just talking about the amendments introduced.
Yes, we are discussing, and therefore we are presuming that they all will be passed. But now let us come to the other issues, which are there. The substantive portions which deal with the extraction of information under the Right to Information Act have not been touched. They are all there. So there are two aspects of it. One, the procedural, and other is the substantive aspect of the law. They have not been touched. One. And secondly, if you look at the anomalies which the minister said was their status was equal to Supreme Court judges. One is a statutory authority, other is a constitutional authority. In all of the laws that we have, there is always a distinction maintained between the statutory authorities and constitutional authorities. One. And secondly, the orders of the CIC are challenged in the High Court. And then giving a status to the Supreme Court judge is certainly not governed by constitutional jurisprudence or the legal jurisprudence as we as lawyers understand. And thirdly, equating CEC with CIC, that aspect is also there, because again one is a constitutional authority and other one is a statutory authority.
Okay,
but let me just finish it off. But we are just presuming that the rules that will be made, we don't know what kind of rules will be made. Under the theory of checks and balances that we have, the government has the right under delegated legislation to make rules. And the moment, these rules are, when they are framed, they are put before Parliament for a particular period of time. And they are objected to also if the members of the Parliament want. And if they are objected to, then they can be discussed. That is what the procedure is. And therefore, right now we would be jumping the gun about what kind of laws that are, those terms and conditions would come.
But we are questioning the logical reasoning for the amendment.
I have given you the reasoning.
Mr. Garga Chatterjee, please come in here and respond. Mr. Deshratan Nigam says that the substantive parts of the Act haven't been touched.
So let me give you an alternate. Let's say we can penal code and decide and appoint judges. What will happen to the penal code?
All right. We can't hear Mr. Chatterjee. Can we just reconnect with him? We'll get a better connection then. Ms. Anjali Bhardwaj, can you respond over here? The substantive parts of the Act haven't been touched, says Mr. Deshratan Nigam.
No, I'm very happy to hear Mr. Nigam say that these amendments might not pass. I really hope that for the sake of democracy in
the
the country that they don't, because they are extremely regressive. Now let me just respond to the points that you have made in terms of
but
how
224 MPs were in favor of the bill as opposed to only 9.
Only
so
the
I'm not sure how either
yeah.
of you are saying you're confident that it won't pass.
Look, the argument that this particular bill equates constitutional bodies and statutory bodies, to my mind, is a completely bogus argument. You pick up the Lokpal law, you pick up the CVC. In each of these cases, these are statutory bodies, and in each of them, in order to ensure that there is no interference by the government, there is a parity fixed with constitutional positions. So this is not happening for the first time. It's not the only law where it is happening, and certainly there is nothing written anywhere in the constitution or any law of this country which prohibits this from happening. In fact, the Supreme Court of India in several cases has actually examined this issue and has not said anything is wrong with this or not constitutional about it. The law has been in existence for more than 13-14 years now, and it hasn't given us any problem. So where this rationale is coming from, nobody knows. Second bit that you mentioned, that when there is an appeal against an information commissioner's orders, it goes to the High Court. That is again factually an incorrect statement.
I never said use the word appeal.
The right to information
under
law,
its jurisdiction.
Yes, under the right to information law, Section 23 says that there will be no appeal against any commissioner's orders. Yes, under a writ jurisdiction, anybody can approach the court. And this is not again something that's unique to information commissioner's orders. Decisions of the Prime Minister, the President, governors are all challenged in writ jurisdiction under even with the high courts. So are we then saying
Anjali Bhardwaj, we've reconnected to Garga Chatterjee, so let him come in, and then I want to give you the last question before we close. Mr. Chatterjee, the TMC has also opposed this, the BJD has abstained, SP has voted against the bill. The division of votes, however, had 224 votes in favor of the introduction of the bill and 9 against it. It didn't help by the fact that the TMC walked out.
Of course, it didn't help, but I think in the history of parliamentary democracy, it has been recorded that when the government, the incumbent party was trying to destroy the independence of an institution like the Information Commission, there were people who stood up and were countered that we do not agree, not in my name. Let me briefly tell you, the fact that you have Indian Penal Code, if you leave that untouched, but make the appointment of judges fully political, the implementation of the Indian Penal Code will be according to what the government of India or the income people want. So in this case, if you keep the procedural part untouched, but if the government, the union government can decide who gets for how long and what money he gets and changes that, it is a signal to everybody that you have to be one of our people. We have at present a government under which a simple information like the educational qualification of the Prime Minister has not been gotten after 5 years. This is the reality. I can also assure you that the next CIC that will be decided under whatever change they will do will not come from any of the 12 states where BJP did not win 50% of the seat. We can predict this. We know how this government operates. Also, these changes are because it also talks about the state election, state IC. It actually encourages it to state right. Silly thinks that it can dictate the right information of people on state.
All right. All right, but still that doesn't explain why it was so mysterious that the Congress and the TMC walked out before, ahead of that voting. But Anjali, I want to give you the last word.
I need to come in here for a minute.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Nigam, quickly. Please, but respond to this answer. If the salary of the commissioner is going to be decided by the centre and the tenure of the commissioner is going to be decided by the centre, which is what the basic amendment is, how does this not make them less independent?
No, the
How
fact
does this
remains
improve
it is
transparency?
in many acts it is done. In fact, the CVC's salaries are also decided by the government. In the case of CVC, let me point out the appeal lies to the Supreme Court, not to the High Court, and that distinction has to be maintained.
Okay.
The real issue is the substantive law has not been touched.
You've already said that.
Yes.
I want to go, last word I want to give to you, Anjali. The point is, no matter what, it's not just this government. If you look at just the vote that happened on this division, 224 MPs in favour, 9 only who have opposed. It's no use putting the blame on the door of this government. Clearly, no political party across the board wants to get this cleared, is in favour of the RTI Act.
Look, the right to information law empowers people, and anyone who is in power would be worried. That I completely agree with you. Having said that, let me also say that if the government, this current government, which came to power on the plank of transparency, good governance, anti-corruption, and the minister stands on the floor of the house and says we are doing this to strengthen transparency, then this is not what is expected. There are several things that need to be done by the central government to ensure that the law functions properly. For example, even as we speak today, out of 11 sanctioned posts in the Central Information Commission, 4 are vacant. Since 2014, when the BJP government came to power, not a single information commissioner has been appointed without people approaching the courts. The government should be focusing on making these amendments, otherwise there are huge pendencies. This particular amendment is absolutely regressive and unnecessary. It's not something that is proving to be a problem in people being able to access their information. And I'm sorry, what it clearly shows is that this government, by bringing this law, has shown that it is not wanting to open itself to public scrutiny, and it's not wanting to be answerable to the people of the country.
All right, but will it be stopped in this by other political parties, because they also will then be open to scrutiny? That remains to be seen. Thank you so much. Sorry we had a shorter time for the debate today because of other breaking news throughout the day. Thank you for joining us on this crucial story. Stay tuned to NDTV for more updates.